Okay, here we are passing through Wolf's Point, and we're headed up to the south side of the river. This area of the river is filled with skyscrapers and retail, and you will still see some of the old commercial buildings, factories, and warehouses that have been converted. However, I want to talk a little bit as we head down the south side of the transformation of the river. The river, originally being kind of our waste receptacle and something that we used for commerce and navigation and transportation, has really transformed in its use and vision by the Chicago citizens. Um, Remember, it was a trade route for the Great Lakes, going to the east as well as down to the Gulf Mississippi. And it was discovered by, this area was discovered really by Joliet and Marquette, Father Marquette being a Catholic priest who was joining the explorers, Joliet, into this region, portaging lower on the southern side of this river, and connecting up through the portage in their explorations into the Great Lakes. And so the Chicago River was a very important trade route. So you see a lot of factories and warehouses, and we used it as a disposal of waste. And unfortunately, Chicago, when the city was being built, we had in the 1850s a Chicago sewer system that combined both wastewater discharges and the floodwaters into the same sewer system. They were the same sewers for how we flushed our toilets as well as rainwater. And this combined sewer system actually is a source of the problem of the river becoming extremely contaminated, and and explains part of its state today. And so the Chicago Sanitary District is created as a government entity. It is not a city entity, but it has its own police force, enforcement, taxation. So it's a local government set off separately by the state of Illinois in 1889 to actually do something about the river. And it is the sanitary ship canal that actually helps get built to cut through and change the river's direction. Now, the sanitary ship canal, we mentioned it earlier, but I want to give you a little more detail. It took about 8 years to build and 6,000 people, primarily uh, Irish immigrants, and this was a 28-mile sanitary ship canal that cut through the Continental Divide and allowed in January 1 of 1900 to reverse the flow of the river. This was critical for the river to heal itself. The river has 25 bridges, and they're primarily these counterweight bridges that we've been going under. So you'll see concrete blocks on one side, and some of the bridges also open up in the middle. And these are called trunnion bridges, and sometimes double trunnion if they open up in the middle and have concrete anchors on each side. The segment of this south branch is important, and you can see the CTA Lake Street train as we go under the bridges. The railroad on the right side, the Amtrak and railroad stations are underground of these buildings, and you can see that. You can see here a very busy part of the river with boat transportation and water taxis and tour boats. Now, while on the river, take note of the different bridges we're going on under, from the Randolph, Washington, Madison, Monroe bridges. And what's great about this is you can tell then where we are geographically inside of the city. As we move along the river now, I want to give you some time where I'm not giving you information to take a look around. And I do this a couple times as we head down this branch and as we return. Now, as we travel down the south branch here of the river, you can see many of our very famous skyscrapers, including the Sears Tower, peeking out as you look around towards your left. And of course, Union Station and the other very large skyscrapers representing uh, the architectural wonders of modernism and cubism here from Mies van der Rohe. And this is a city of architecture as well that is built right along the banks of our river. This area you could also see a lot more individual recreationalists on individual boats traveling around um, and enjoying the river. As we go through these last couple remaining bridges before we turn around, you're going to also see significant attempts to redevelop this area of the river. On the right-hand side, as we pass, is one of the largest former post offices in the United States, and it is no longer being used. You can imagine we needed this post office because of large mail order warehouses like Montgomery Ward that we talked about earlier, and of course Sears. And so now this property has sat empty for a very long time. The Congress Bridge coming up here goes right through the middle of the old post office, and it has been now the largest brownfield, I guess, in the U.S. in terms of square footage, and it's being renovated, and it looks like it's going to have a lot of commercial and retail and some residential space inside of it. Also, as you look around, you can see the city changes a little bit as we pass the old post office and head farther south. You can see that there is a tremendous amount of residential buildings going up, and to the left, and then of course to the right, the older industrial parts of the river. We're headed to River City, and River City was actually finished in 1986. It's going to be coming up on the other side of this bridge. And you'll see on the left side large banks of limestone that are being excavated and revitalized for the banks of the river. As we move along the river now, I want to give you some time where I'm not giving you information to take a look around. And I do this a couple times as we head down this branch and as we return. And the River City establishment here off to our left was actually built as an opposition to suburban flight out of the city in the 1970s. It opened in 1986, and it is a city within a city. So you can park your boats underneath. There's a school inside, of course, stores, retails. People live on houseboats within this particular complex. And so this honeycomb-shaped kind of building was a major kind of urban redesign element for the Chicago River when it opened. Now, as we get towards the end here, we're going to turn around. You can see off to the right a utility smokestack for energy, a power plant, and just further down, which is hard to view, but further down here is where the original fire started in 1871 for Chicago. And we have a city ordinance that passed that it claims it was not the a famous O'Leary barn that started the fire. But in fact, the fire did start somewhere down here and raged in October in 1871 from all the way on the south side here of the river and all the way up to the north and jumped the main branch of the river and went all the way up to the water tower area, which is one of the few buildings that was remained standing in Chicago's kind of downtown district because it was made of limestone and not wood. Unfortunately, Chicago built the city originally before the fire on wood. And so we had a severe drought that spring and summer of 1871. And so when fire started in the city that fall, it just ravaged the city. And so the city actually had to restart. And so the fire starts in October 8th, 1871, jumps the river because of the south wind, winds actually just pushing the fire. And it really has a devastating effect. We have 300 people actually die, 1/3 of a loss of homes, and thousands of buildings that were destroyed from the city. But it was also a rebuilding time, and the city was then kind of a magnet to investors and entrepreneurs and architects to come and rebuild the city. And one of the great architectural engineering revolutionary designs is this skeletal steel frame approach to building cities and buildings. And so what happened was we started to get architects coming to try out the steel skeletal frame, and we then have what is the early birth of skyscrapers. So we're going to turn around here, and Chinatown, as well as kind of the further southern reaches of our city, are down this branch, but we are not going to continue all the way down. But this is where the Chicago fire starts, and you can see it traveled much of the distance of our riverboat tour. On the right, you can see vegetative regrowth that I talked about, and the reclaiming of our banks into much more pedestrian friendly and better used um, of the river so that people can enjoy this as a recreational river, not just a river of industry and commerce. I'm going to have you take a look at everything that we talked about here for a minute. Off to the left is the new post office, and you can see the trucks here of our more modern post office. But I'm going to go ahead and have you take some time to look around, particularly at these beautiful views of the Sears Tower and the skyscrapers, and close out with you as we return back to Wolf's Point. I'll meet up with you. Now, as we head back to our dock, you can see, as I mentioned earlier, that the river has really been divided into rooms, what we're calling architectural rooms and uses. And so you will see outdoor sitting areas, retail and eateries, libation areas, artistic areas. And so the river has become kind of a space that has different characteristics in each of the areas, but there's tremendous urban regional planning going on here in bringing people back down to the river as an asset and having eateries and museums and biking trails, etc. Things to do at the river to keep people down here recreating as well as enjoying the commercial districts of the river. Thank you for joining me on this river virtual reality tour. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And I think this is a great way to learn about the river and experience it. Like I said in the beginning, replay this, enjoy it, look around. I wanted to make sure you had time on this cruise to just take in all of the areas. And you can pause at any time if you want to take like a better look under a bridge or be curious and look at some of the activities and reconstruction taking place more closely. So feel free to replay this and mute this. And I hope you have come to appreciate our Chicago River as much as I have.